that people really don't know about. I think people have heard a little bit about DAOs, or kind of heard about the DAO way back in the day related to Ethereum, which was not the most positive results. But it's amazing to see that I really think over the last year, kind of seen really the discussions like 20x in terms of people talking about DAOs and the power behind them and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, completely. I think that's in part because Ethereum has not always only been about money, right? A big aspect of Ethereum has been about moving around assets, but it's also a great place to enable people to coordinate themselves. So to take those assets and do something productive with it. Maybe that's invest in a company, maybe that's give a grant to a developer, maybe that's, fund a project, or not for profit that you think is important. But we didn't have the tooling that was in place to really start re-accelerating those conversations until the past couple of months. And I think that's what's amazing about the Ethereum ecosystem. And also, part of that tooling which we needed was Chainlink oracles, right? We needed a reliable oracle service so that we can begin to interact with the real world and present information in a way that's understandable for folks that are participating. So the stack that I think we've been collectively building, what we've called on the OpenLaw side, the OLA stack, which obviously is a little self-serving, but we'll use it anyway, which is like OpenLaw as kind of the interface with the real world, Chainlink to get the data, then Ethereum to settle up and keep track of a whole bunch of different things when it comes to assets. We think that's the operating system of that future world that you're sitting in right now, and really a testament to how we're able to actually start building some of these things that we're all collectively excited about. And even if you look back in Ethereum's white paper, which Vitalik put together, it really talked a lot about DAOs, right? It wasn't just being programmable assets or generalizing Bitcoin. A lot of it was, hey, we can build these new organizations that change the way we operate. So instead of relying on things like, traditional corporations or other forms of entities, we can rely on math, we can rely on radical transparency, and bring trust to folks that are otherwise unwilling to trust one another. And I think that vision is really important. And I do think as the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years play out, you're going to start to see DAOs kind of crop up and really rebuild the way that we begin to work together across the globe.
Awesome. Well, nice organically just went into the Q&A here, which was awesome. But to kind of get into that, I just want to say, hey, that's okay. It's if you're not excited about it, why are we doing it, right? I mean, that's the thing. It's got to excite you, kind of what you're doing, and it makes everything so much easier. But yeah, just quickly, I just want to thank everybody for joining us. Obviously, just kind of got started here. Obviously, the OpenLaw, LAO, Chainlink community, blockchain community for kind of joining us here today. This is a Q&A session, probably going to go about 30, 40 minutes. Basically, where we have Aaron, of course, joining us from OpenLaw, and the LAO. We'll get into a little bit about, you mentioned a little bit about how that stack works, but I definitely like to kind of explore that. We did get some questions earlier about how all this kind of works together. And then Johan, of course, product manager for Chainlink. Aaron, kind of as we get started, would you mind just kind of maybe introducing yourself, a little bit of your background, and kind of maybe how you got started in this field?
Yeah, sure. So I have a background in law and technology. I'm actually a full-time law professor at a law school in New York called Cardozo Law School. I fell down the Bitcoin rabbit hole really early in 2011. I started really thinking deeply about Bitcoin as kind of a protocol for money, which led me to start thinking about not just a protocol for money, but a protocol for rules or laws and or contracts. So when Vitalik and team dropped the Ethereum white paper, I realized that I wasn't alone in this world, which is always a really great feeling. And so I reached out and was able to play a small role to help the Ethereum Foundation launch, dealing with a lot of the legal structuring issues related to that. And then I've been just, continuing down that rabbit hole over the past couple of years. I've had the pleasure of writing co-authoring a book that Harvard University Press published on blockchain law and policy, dealt with a lot of policy issues, worked with a lot of great teams in the Ethereum ecosystem, including with Sergey and Steve on the Chainlink and earlier manifestations of what they've been working on over the past couple of years. From the beginning, really, with Ethereum, there's always been this notion of not only having Ethereum be an asset settlement layer, not only having oracles, but also coupling those with a concept called a Ricardian contract, which is creating legal agreements, things that the real world can understand and interpret, but converting them into machine-readable objects and elements so that they can interact with kind of this digital world, this digital commercial world that we're building. And that's what we've been doing with OpenLaw. I'm the co-founder of that, along with David Roon, who's a fantastic person and a tremendous developer who's based in Switzerland.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you very much for that. I'm always amazed at the speed of OpenLaw development. To be quite honest, it seems like I'm seeing a tweet like every week, or people requesting, which I think is a really cool, is the interaction, where I've seen people be like, man, wouldn't it be cool if we could do this? And then literally 2 days later, I see that this is what you asked for, you can do it.
You know, well, we want to make people happy. I think you're going to see a lot more even outside of the LAO, which I think we're going to dive into, but there's a lot on OpenLaw's roadmap that deals with Chainlink, and also is hopefully going to help distribute that to more folks. So in the next couple of weeks, I'm happy to dive in, kind of give a preview of that too, if we don't only want to talk about DAOs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, happy to talk about what you want to talk about. I think you guys are doing a lot of great things, and would love to hear as much as we can definitely fit in. So Johan, I know people know who you are. I think people are starting to get an idea of what you do, but would you just kind of explain, what do you do? What is your what is your current role in terms of, what are you doing kind of day to day?
Yeah, sure. So I think I'm at a very kind of lucky place at Chainlink, where basically I can work with all the projects on Ethereum which need Oracle data, right? So recently I've been working with many DeFi projects. For instance, I've had the pleasure to work with Aaron for some stuff with the LAO. So yeah, it's basically seeing how Chainlink can help projects go where they need to go, right? So I need price data on Ethereum. I need extremely reliable, transparent price data that my users can be comfortable using my platform, right? They need to see how I'm fetching this data. I use Chainlink, and we see how Chainlink can fit into their system, how we can build the best features to really grow the ecosystem. So yeah, my role has really been to gather feedback on how we can improve our product by working with users and getting these users set up using Chainlink.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you so much for that. So kind of getting into our first kind of official question here. What is kind of moving to the DAOs and LAOs? So would you mind, Aaron, really explaining kind of in your simple terms, you could maybe, what is a DAO, and then what is the LAO, and what are the kind of differences that people can see there?
Yeah, so the DAO, for folks that weren't in the space, back in 2016, it was really kind of the first experiment using Ethereum for purposes of funding projects. So this was before ICOs. A group of developers, mostly out of Germany and Switzerland, put together and tried to kind of breathe life into this vision that Vitalik Buterin and others in the Bitcoin/Ethereum ecosystem have had, of building organizations that aren't solely reliant on paper documents, but rely on smart contracts to kind of manage their operations. So really cool concept. The thought, and I mentioned this a couple minutes if you're just joining, was really that you can use the rigid aspect of smart contracts and the power of Ethereum to have a whole bunch of different people, from regardless of where they live, contribute capital and allocate that capital out to projects that were in need. And at that point in time, there wasn't as many dApps, and there wasn't as many projects and developers that are working on Ethereum. So lots of folks that were interested in Ethereum, lots of early folks that held Ether, pledged a tremendous amount of capital to the DAO and kind of launched this project. But because it's so difficult to do smart contract development, which I imagine Johan is very familiar with at this point, and I'm sure many of our listeners are as well, it ended up becoming a spectacular mess. So the DAO raised a tremendous amount of capital, and then a hacker was able to drain a portion of that capital, ultimately led to a hard fork, which birthed Ethereum Classic and kind of became one of these watershed moments in the history of Ethereum. And then, over the years after the DAO, I think people realized, oh my God, like Ethereum is amazing at pulling together capital and allocating it. right? So I shouldn't just be through something like a DAO. I should use that for my own project. And it kind of birthed the token sale boom and ICO boom, which I think lots of folks were excited about and funded a lot of great innovation. Obviously not great projects, but a lot of great projects, obviously Chainlink being one of them. And I think that, we've seen over the past couple of years that some of the luster on using Ethereum for capital formation purposes for raising money for projects is kind of dulled a bit. But for us, I think that it's really one of the core use cases of Ethereum, and we can't forget about it. So we've taken steps over the past couple months to kind of reboot the DAO concept, right? We should be able to pool funds on Ethereum, allocate that out to projects that need assistance, and also generate a profit from doing that. The major difference is twofold. Number one, we streamline the smart contracts so they're more secure. It's much simpler. So we've kind of gotten to a point in the Ethereum ecosystem where we have almost like the ERC20 standard for organizations. So if you want to put together an organization of any sort, you kind of now have the blueprint that you can build off of. We've worked with a great project called DAO and a tremendous developer named Amin Soleimani to kind of take his work and extend it and generalize it. And we think it fits into lots of different organizational structures, not just what we're doing with the LAO, but with a whole bunch of other things. The second thing that we're doing is we're trying to do it in the right way in the US, which I know is not always the easiest place to do business, but we think an important place to do business. Maybe this is the New Yorker in me, but I feel like if we can make it work in the US, then we can kind of make it work anywhere. So we've taken steps to kind of work through the legal requirements of what it would take to set up a DAO in the US. And we've used OpenLaw's tooling, Chainlink's tooling, and also Ethereum and the smart contracts to basically merge those all together. So when you're interacting with the LAO, it looks like a dApp on the front end, but on the back end, all the boring paperwork and other information that's needed is getting pulled in dynamically. So a member of our team likes to call the LAO a reverse mullet. It's all a party in the front and then all business in the back. So that's what I think is kind of the right way to think about it. But at a higher level, look, like when Ethereum started, when Bitcoin started, I think lots of us recognized that the financial world was a little bit rotten. We saw kind of the fallout from the great financial crisis. We didn't see much of a response from folks that were in charge, and we took to technology to change that. And Bitcoin really took that mantle. I think Ethereum expanded that. But the commercial system's not just rotted out at the banking level, it's also a little rotten in Silicon Valley, where they fund only a handful of companies. It's really difficult if you're an entrepreneur that's not based in the Valley to gain access to capital. You have to kind of have the right background or have gone to the right schools to gain access to that capital. And while there's been a tremendous hits and tremendous companies that have come out of that, it's not fair and it's not evenly distributed. We think it's time to really build a Silicon Valley in the sky, one that is permissionless, one that's open to everybody. And the LAO is kind of a first step at rebuilding towards that future. And what we imagine is this ecosystem, of DAOs that will work together so that everybody around the globe will be able to, fund their project. They can go to, they can build their software, they can build a community on Twitter, they can hopefully hold live streams like what you're holding, Rory. And if people want to support them, they'll be able to get capital to do that. That means they don't have to move to San Francisco, take a jog down Sand Hill Road. If they're in Paris, if they're in Africa, if they're in Asia, it really doesn't matter. And I think that's really important for us to kind of collectively do as a community. And so that's why we put it together.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. I know one of the things, and maybe Johan, you can kind of attest to this, but DeFi now, specifically in DeFi, everyone's wanting security. Everyone's wanting these peer-reviewed projects, and the smart contract needs to be reviewed multiple times. But the reality is the funding for that can be tremendously expensive. And so what I've kind of seen is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the community is demanding more. And I'm talking about the kind of blockchain community in terms of security. But at the same time, if you're a single guy or girl wanting to create this new DeFi project, the reality is, my guess is it's very expensive.
There is a huge disconnect, in my opinion, where people, the narrative has always been we want tens of thousands of developers building on Ethereum. But the reality is someone who's building on Ethereum needs to have some capital behind, right? Because there are audits, there many security steps to be taken, which, if they're not taken, threaten the people who are putting money into a protocol, right? And this can end up having disastrous consequences. So I think it's a very particular narrative where we want so many developers building, but at the same time, there still has to be a level of if it's not funding, it would be expertise and knowledge, which allows these developers to build something which people can use safely, right? So yeah, I definitely do agree there. And yeah, I really admire what Aaron has been working on and doing, and the vision behind all of this. I think it makes complete sense, and it mixes very well with where we want to take, the ecosystem forward, basically.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that answer. So looking at the LAO, can you kind of explain, Aaron? I've checked out the website. I've looked at it. We'll put those in the links in the description below. But it looks, on the surface, it looks relatively simple. Can you kind of explain sort of how people can either create or participate?
Yeah, and we are starting simply. So to participate, there's multiple ways to participate, but two primary ways. One is as a member or somebody that contributes capital to the LAO, and the second one's a project. And the third one is really the community who can kind of weigh in and source projects that they're excited about or interested in, or think that are deserving of funding. So as a member, if you want to join as a member, you can fill out a basic form just so we know who you are and can attest to that, similar to what you put together if you are going to trade something on an exchange. And then if you're based in the US, we also have to verify that you're accredited, i.e. that you have enough capital in order to take the risk of making investments. So once that information is provided, you can join the LAO. It's on a first come, first serve basis. We opened it up an hour or so ago, and we already have, I think a little under $500,000 that's been committed into it. So it's looking pretty good. I imagine that, and from conversations, that will continue to tick up over the upcoming days and weeks. So there'll be up to 100 folks that can contribute capital in order to make investments. And then on the project side, projects can apply. We've had 25 projects that are already seeking funding from the LAO. And what we do is at the moment that they seek funding, we actually rely on a Chainlink oracle in order to denominate the investment amount. So by default, the LAO is going to make $50,000 investments using a structure that's used in Silicon Valley and approved by the Silicon Valley type law firms. But the amount is going to change because the entire LAO is denominated in Ether. So in order to kind of ground that into the real world, because I think it's easy for people to think in terms of US dollars and not in terms of Ether, at least at this point, we're using a Chainlink oracle to basically lock down the investment price, which is pretty cool. And also on the way in, if you want to accredit yourself and provide evidence of the fact that you've got a lot of crypto assets, we use a Chainlink oracle behind the scenes so that we can validate that information on the back end. So it's lots of different times when we're using that. There's also a token curated registry, which is a pretty cool crypto economic system that enables a whole bunch of different folks to kind of source and curate a list of items. So we put one together for top projects that folks think the LAO members should invest in. So if you think that there's a great project, you can go over to the LAO, click on the Scout button, and you can put in a project that you think should be supported. So a whole bunch of different things, and we're starting simply at the beginning because that's where we are. We're still there on the smart contract side. You don't want to run before you can walk, so we're walking at this point. And as we get more confident and take bigger and bigger strides, what we're going to hopefully be able to do is in future DAOs that we put together, also make sure that unaccredited investors can participate. There's still a lot of work to be done to make sure that that's feasible, both in the technical side and also on the policy side. But we think that if we can have a couple of successful DAOs that are really helping support entrepreneurs, there'll be hopefully a strong and convincing policy argument that we can make here in the US. And my sense is if we can win those arguments here, a lot like what Coinbase has done, for various different assets, then I think that there'll be one abroad too, and we can kind of achieve this vision that I talked about before. So it's not it's not rocket science in terms of a concept. We're bringing together capital, making investments, projects apply for investments. What's magical is everything that's going on behind the scenes, right? It's all the votes are being tracked by Ethereum. The moment that the members vote to make an investment, it automatically gets deployed to the project. And then all the paperwork gets automatically generated kind of on the back end using OpenLaw and with the aid of a Chainlink Oracle helping that out. So it's kind of this 1, 2, 3 punch that really makes this feasible. So thinking back to when the DAO launched, a couple of years ago, we couldn't do this, right? We couldn't even get something close to it. It was all command line. There was no dApps, right? It was hard to connect wallets. You couldn't paper things up. You couldn't really do a lot of the voting mechanisms that we have now. And it's all kind of come seamlessly together, which is pretty cool and really fast, right?
Yeah, really fast is I think it's kind of an understatement in a sense, because I kind of saw the LAO was being talked about, or it's like, hey, this is going to come soon, and then it came soon. It was pretty quickly seemed to be put together, but like I said before, even with OpenLaw and other things, it always just seems like it's move quickly. People ask for things, or people say, hey, that this is a great idea, that you guys move quickly and work to kind of get that deployed, that people can use it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of how we approach things. We got a great team, but we think that smart contracts are going to be everywhere, right? The world is run by contracts. It's run by paper. It sits in the background until we have events like what we're all collectively going through, when everybody kind of dusts those off and checks their rights and obligations, and then tries to squirrel their way out of it. And that's happening across the board. But Ethereum and and the dynamic capabilities of oracles and other services, it really just accelerates everything. The fact that a company can apply, and through the LAO, as an example, they could receive funding in 7 days. That's magical, right? You literally don't need to leave your apartment or your house or your the place where you live. And you're able to potentially raise capital for your project in 7 days. No flights, right? Maybe a couple of Zoom meetings, maybe some questions and discussions with various different members in the LAO community. But if people are excited about your project, you're going to receive funding for that. And that's incredible. We can't do that today, right? Like the most agile Silicon Valley fund is not going to be able to do that. We can only do that in Ethereum. And I think that that's something that we should really be proud of. Just the fact that that's technically possible is pretty freaking cool. So we're super excited about that. Yeah, and then going forward, we want to distribute smart contracts and blockchain technology to the world. And we're taking a lot of steps to do that. It may not be apparent, but we like to call contracts kind of the dark matter of the commercial world. It's like everywhere. Nobody ever looks at it. Nobody really understands it except a handful of people. And so what we've been building towards, and I think you'll see this in a couple of weeks, we've actually built what you can think of as like a MetaMask for the Microsoft Office suite, where the 1.2 billion Microsoft Office ecosystem users will actually be able, from Microsoft Word, to interact with Chainlink oracles and execute smart contracts and automate the legal agreements with them too. So some really, really cool stuff that's coming out of our team.
Yeah, that's pretty groundbreaking, I think, to see that I'm assuming someone like a lawyer could essentially create a contract in Word, but at the same time, it's also creating a smart contract. Is that basically
Correct.
how it works?
Exactly, yeah. And then from Word, they can just click a button and it will get executed on chain. So no need to have a wallet set up. We can take care of a lot of the interactions into us, the smart contracting layers of Ethereum. And you can also pull in data from outside oracles, right? So you can set up the agreement, so it pulls in data from a Chainlink oracle, plops it into a legally binding contract. People edit it or play around with it in Word, because that's what lawyers like to do. When they're ready to go, they click a couple buttons to sign it, and then transactions get executed on chain. So super cool, and works natively with a tremendous network that I think people overlook. But Microsoft's Office network is 1.2 billion people. Right? That's a lot of people that are spending their lives in some sort of Microsoft related product on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, that's very cool. It also, makes me think in a very short amount of time, I could hop on Word and add, smart contract developer to my LinkedIn profile, which I'm sure we'll see some people be doing very quickly.
I hope so. Yeah, absolutely.
Also, Johan, I guess kind of building on sort of this, and I'd love to put you on the spot, but what are some, obviously we kind of explored the use case of oracles in this kind of circumstance. In terms of DAOs, do you see maybe any other opportunity for oracles, getting involved, or things that oracles could do that are useful for something like a DAO or LAO in other ways than we discussed currently?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So first, just to start off, I'm always surprised with the use cases you can find with oracles in specific domains, right? So for DeFi, for instance, it's very funny actually. 1 year ago, I didn't know there would be so much need for anything to work DeFi related based on oracles, right? Which of course, in hindsight, is extremely obvious. But I think we always underestimate the importance of oracle and link to data from the real world in any kind of industry which is going to develop, right? So right now, very simply, I can definitely see a big dependence on oracles. If you want to have a kind of fully decentralized governance process, which doesn't require too many off-chain interactions, where basically users need off-chain to be aware of a certain event happening and vote upon this event, if they're able to have all the interactions which are being captured on-chain, it can move basically as many interactions and as many events as possible to the on-chain smart contract layer instead of leaving a huge portion of kind of decision at an off-chain level, right? So in my opinion, DAOs, in order to function properly, do definitely need oracles, because oracles allows them to kind of concentrate the power of decision at an on-chain level instead of relying on an off-chain kind of triggers. I think that's extremely obvious for me. So I can't tell you any specific use case right now. Thank you for putting me on the spot. But I can, however, tell you that to me, the vision of building a DAO goes hand in hand with having good and reliable oracles, because that's how you enforce trust with off-chain based events.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I see cases in one of the things I've always thought of is, charity and things like that, where I think people would be much more willing to give both capital and time to organizations that were very transparent in both how they operated, how they made decisions, and things like that. So I know with that, I mean, that's definitely a use case personally that kind of excites me, is saying, how incredible would it be to see some type of organization that, kind of gives back, but anyone in the world could actually see how they distribute those funds. Yes, there was a hurricane in Haiti. Yes, there was this event. Yes, there's this. And then they could say, well, we wanted to allocate 25% of our capital to go to, this particular cause. And you could see all of that kind of live on chain, even as someone who didn't participate in that, charity DAO, I could see that. And I think just to me, that transparency of it really opening up and allows people to really not have to trust, various systems to take care of things, but can really create this trustless, kind of mechanisms that I think make people feel more comfortable in doing things that they're hesitant to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key thing is just price data or outside data in general. So, one area that we are interested in and have thought a lot about is just insurance. I think we've seen a lot of great projects that are emerging in the insurance space. Again, not the most exciting thing, but insurance enables you to kind of manage your downside risk and thus take more risk. But if you think about what an insurance fund really is, it's just a pool of capital, right? It's like an over collateralized pool of capital. And the idea is that you have enough capital at hand, and it hopefully enough to deal with whatever risk that you want to insure. But as we think about kind of building those types of tooling into the Ethereum ecosystem, which are going to be necessary. Insurance has existed, since the Roman times, if not even before. You're going to need these outside data feeds in order to either trigger events, so trigger events when things need to be paid or claims need to be made, but also to assess other important factors about how how that fund should operate. I think also we're going to see, and I know lots of folks are already thinking about this, but Ethereum eventually suck in more assets. So not just natively digital assets, but other assets that that exist in the kind of legacy tangible world. So not in Chainlink City where you guys are, but in boring old New York, right? There's lots of value that just kind of locked in paperwork. But as we're able to kind of represent them on chain, and if there's an outside data source for the value, let's say it's like some tradable stock, right? We're gonna need to be able to grab that data, pull that in, and take actionable events from that. So funds exist everywhere, right? It's not just venture capital funds, but there's a whole bunch of private equity funds, hedge funds, like all these types of entities. My sense is eventually will become a DAO, and all of those entities which now need outside data feeds are going to need blockchain compatible data feeds in the future. So instead of getting that from, let's say, like Bloomberg or some large or Thomson Reuters, we're going to probably need to rely on a service like Chainlink that will provide that trusted data that they need, which is, I think, incredibly important.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree. I think the future's bright, and I think I would sometimes have to take a step back and just say sometimes in blockchain everything, we're kind of just getting started. It seems like sometimes it seems like a month is a year, especially around these times. But at the same time, if you look at things like how long it took from, factories to move from steam to electricity, and it took like 40 years or something like that. And it's like, but think how quickly we move now, where it seems like, it's been 6 months and everyone's wondering what's going on. But the reality is a lot of things are changing very rapidly.
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect.
So yeah, I mean, look, we're starting. It's gonna take some time, but collectively we're gonna get there. And I think I'm so deep in the trenches. I just remember back to 2016. Like playing around with smart contracts for the first time, deploying them. We've made so much progress over the past couple of years, and it really does feel like, particularly now when everybody's heads down for the most part. People are working really hard. I think you start to see all these kind of financial and also like legal Lego blocks coming together. And that's why we're able to do really cool things like put together a DAO today, right? That would not have been feasible in 2017 or 2018. But now, it wasn't a huge heavy lift. I mean, in part, to your question before, we're able to output so much stuff because the tooling that we have in our hands is just better, right? If you're cutting down a tree with an axe, that's really hard. But if you have a chainsaw, right, that's much faster. And that's kind of what we're getting. We're just getting much better tooling. And it's not just our tooling; it's also tooling like what's being provided by the Chainlink ecosystem, right? It's also the advanced tooling that's getting built on Ethereum. It's just all getting better. So it's kind of like for developers, it's kind of like kids in candy shop. They're just pulling off these new awesome tools that they can begin to use to build things, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, I completely agree. So tell me, you mentioned a little bit about OpenLaw, maybe some things that you guys are looking at, or maybe a sneak peek you can share. Love to kind of explore what you guys have in the works or what you guys are thinking of starting to work on or develop on here in the near future.
Yeah, so we're really thinking about 3 separate things. It's so our focus is really on the stack. How do you get everybody in the world to update their commercial operating system to Ethereum, Oracle services like Chainlink, and also OpenLaw. And so to do that, we have the crypto native projects like the LAO. So being able to set up a DAO now is going to take no time at all. And not just like a toy DAO or some of the earlier DAO experiments, which I think were amazingly cool, and we definitely stand on their shoulders, but something that will really work in the real world. I think we're at that point in time. So I think you're gonna see us spin up a whole bunch of different DAOs over the next couple months. Hopefully DAOs for large protocols that are looking to increasingly decentralize themselves so that they can support developers or hire workers or do other things that are necessary for the ecosystem to stand apart from its initial creators. I think you're gonna start to see DAOs for individual projects. So if a project's really amazing, has a lot of supporters, folks I think will be able to start contributing to that project via DAO, which I think is pretty awesome. And then on the more enterprisey side, we really want to meet business people where they operate. That's why we're moving so heavily into the Microsoft ecosystem. Microsoft has tremendous distribution in enterprises. They're the largest, if not one of the largest companies in the world for that reason. So we're going to push pretty heavily into that as well. And then the last thing that we're really working on is abstracting away the need for gas and wallets. So we want folks to not need a wallet, not need to have Ether kind of on hand in order to execute transactions. We already have a bit of that tooling in place, but I think we're going to expand that. Oh, sorry, my internet just kicked. We're going to expand that over the next couple of months. So a lot of exciting things, and I think if we catch up in 6 months, we'll be like, oh wow, remember 2020 when when things were much simpler times.
Perfect. Well, thank you. I thank you for sharing that, and I think people will be very interested in kind of following that progress. If they want to continue to follow that progress, Aaron, what's the best way would you recommend for them to do so?
Yeah, so for the LAO, you can go to thelao.io. You can kind of see where we are. There's a really robust Telegram community that's emerged, so feel free to join. That's probably the best way to stay in touch there. On the OpenLaw side, just follow us on Twitter. We, as you noted, we like to pump out and pump up a bunch of content that we're creating. So it's a great way to stay up to speed and stay up to date. And if you want to check out our site, it's openlaw.io. That's going to get a refresh over the next couple of weeks. So it's going to look a little bit different by the beginning of May.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, we'll make sure to have all those links in the description as well for everybody to follow up so that they can track things. And like you said, hopefully a little bit down the road, we can kind of do this again and reflect and talk about all the new developments on both the OpenLaw, LAO, and Chainlink side. So looking forward to that down the road. And what about, are you speaking conference wise? I know there's a lot of virtual conferences. Are you going to be doing any of those in the near future?
Yeah, so if you are interested in DAOs, we're going to be at Consensus, the great conference that Coindesk puts together. We'll also be at Ethereum, and there's going to be a handful of others that we'll be participating in. And I think what's great is that they're now open to everybody. So for the most part, so I think that's a really nice enhancement, a silver lining in today's somewhat bleak times.
Perfect. Well, again, Aaron, thank you so much for taking the time. That kind of wraps up our Q&A for today. Again, thank you, Johan, as well, for joining us during his busy schedule as well. I'd also like to thank Priyanka, who does a great job with Aaron, kind of helping me line this stuff up. So she put some time and effort into this. So I want to thank her as well. We're, of course, looking to do more of these in the future, more with OpenLaw, more about the LAO, and more with any other projects that we're kind of working with in our ecosystem. So make sure to subscribe to get all those updates. But Aaron, thank you once again. Stay safe. Really appreciate it. Best of luck, and we look forward to following your progress.
Yeah, thanks, Rory. Thanks, Johan. Great catching up.
Perfect.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Johan. You guys have a great day.
Thank you, Rory. Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.